What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is NCIS Season 15, Episodes 5 through 7. So, 3 episodes to talk about, with all of them fairly interesting in their own right, but one definitely standing out a little bit more than the others. So, let's get right into this. First of all, we have Episode 5, Fake It Till You Make It. Um, Pretty good episode overall, mainly because we get a little bit more in depth on Clayton Reeves, which I do like because frankly he hasn't been given that much time to shine. He's had a few moments here and there over the past couple seasons, but for the most part he's kind of been out of the picture. Last season he was hardly there. The scenes where he was were pretty funny. He and Torres had a pretty good back and forth, but this season hasn't really been involved. So it just kind of seemed strange that he was not around and then he was around and he wasn't around. So now we're starting to see a little bit more of him this season. He's definitely taking a bit more of a team member role than he was last season. And so this one, we see him talking to this girl in an AA meeting. Finding out he's in an AA meeting in the first place is kind of like, oh, well, that's interesting. He said he told Ellie about it whenever they were on assignment together. I don't remember if we saw that scene or not, but to me this was a surprise to see him there. But ultimately, the girl he's talking to gets kidnapped, and so we go through this whole episode where trying to find her, they find her, but her ex-boyfriend that she dumped because he was abusive turns up dead. But frankly, the as interesting as this episode was, getting a bit more in depth on Clayton, the frustrating thing about it is I called it from the beginning. I called that she was going to be the killer and that she was actually behind it all. Because there was just something off about her. The thought that she randomly killed him and they're slowly finding out that he was drugged and she was saying, oh, he was just tipsy from drinking or something like that. I'm like, no, you're lying about all this. They're already finding information that's disproving what you're saying. And the problem that I have with all this, I completely understand why Clayton fell for it because, he probably did have some feelings for her. They formed a pretty close relationship during these AA meetings, and frankly, I mean, that's one of the easiest places to trust people for the most part, because you have to trust people if you're going to share any of your information there. But yeah, he's got a good excuse, but the rest of the team doesn't. And frankly, Jack Sloan, the new girl on the team, I mean, she didn't have an excuse at all. And I hate to call it out in this episode because, frankly, the next 2 episodes I do start to like her a bit more. But in this one in particular, I'm like, you're supposed to be a psychologist, right? Which means you should be able to sort of tell when she's not being truthful. And you're sitting right there in the room and she's telling this whole story, and I'm looking at her like, something's off about this story. It just feels like something is off. And she doesn't say anything about it. And it isn't until later on in the episode when she's looking into the ex-boyfriend that died, and she's like, he's not exhibiting any of the traits of being an abusive person like she's claiming, but she, on the other hand, is very prone to deception, it seems like. I'm like, well, why didn't you notice that at first? Why did it take you digging into the ex-boyfriend and finding nothing that she's saying to finally realize, oh, hey, maybe I should look into the... You should already know. Like, if you're that good at psychology, you should be able to tell when somebody isn't being completely honest, especially when it's a blatant lie like she was telling. Because she murdered him and she's claiming, oh, no, it was self-defense, he had a gun to me. You should be able to tell when she's lying about that. So, yeah, a bit of a problem with that episode, but I did like what they did with Clayton Reeves' character in this one. I do think it, expanded upon him a little bit more, and I mean, frankly, I do enjoy seeing him in the show and seeing a bit more of him because, like I said, he and Torres have a pretty good back and forth going for the most part. So, hoping to see a bit more of him. But that's about it for this episode. There was a funny little side story where McGee ends up getting a meme made of him. He's got like this afro back in the old days at school. And so he's trying to figure out who did it, and then ultimately finds out who made the meme of him, who found that picture and turned it into something like that, and then it turns out to be Denozo. So he shares like an old picture of him wearing like these goofy glasses and with a bowl cut. So I don't know, just little nice touch thrown in there with those two. But that's it for that episode. So we go into the sixth episode, Trapped. This one, pretty interesting case overall. I will say the side story going on this one, for me, the first episode was McGee and the meme. This one was a little bit more predictable and something I've seen a lot. We see Torres is being rushed in the morning and Jimmy's talking about, can you make a donation to this place? And he's just like, sure, yeah. So he types it in quickly on his computer. I'm like, let me guess. Huge donation, right? Like he meant to put in like, I don't know, a smaller amount and then accidentally typed in a bigger amount. That's pretty much exactly what happens. And by the end of the episode, I'm like, let me guess. He's going to see what good the money is going to and he's going to have a change of heart, right? That's exactly what happens. So that part of it was very predictable and not that interesting because I've seen it so much. It was kind of funny to see it happen to Torres, though, because he is kind of a selfish person for the most part. But aside from that, that was pretty much it for the side stories. There is a little bit of a side story building with Sloane and Reeves for some reason. We do see eventually the whole team is kind of asking more questions about her, but specifically in this episode, for some reason, he's really looking into her and he's trying to figure out what she's about. I'm not sure why. But yeah, he's asking all these questions, why is she looking into us? Why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? None of the team really cares. In the next episode, they care a little bit more. But for this episode in particular, it's just Reeves looking into her. But as far as the case is concerned, we see these guys golfing on a golf course. There's one of the guys, his ball is up under the lawnmower, and I know this is a minor thing to gripe about, but the guy goes to move it out from under the lawnmower, and the guy kicks it back up under there. He's like, hey, play by the rules. Play it where it lies. According to the rules, if there's a man-made hazard in the way, you can move it. If they're doing construction on a golf course, you can move it out of there. If there's a lawnmower in the way, you can move it out of the lawnmower because it's not a hazard that's naturally on the course. It's not a tree or a sand trap. I know it's a minor thing, but I don't know. It feels like somebody should have caught that. It's a line that doesn't make sense when you really. If these guys have been out there playing for as long as they claim, yeah, the guy would pop back with a man-made hazard. I can move the ball away from this, but whatever. It's the little things that bug me sometimes. But anyway, they find a dead body after the guy tries to move the lawnmower. So turns out to be a lieutenant trying to figure out what happened to him. Going through this whole case, trying to figure out, what did this guy what was he involved in? Oh, there's cocaine on his shirt. Was he maybe smuggling? McGee is talking on this ham radio because he's got a nerd out over something in this episode. And ultimately, I kind of liked being able to figure out in this episode. At some point, they happen upon this guy that McGee's been talking to on the ham radio, and they go visit him, and he brings out his dog. And it turns out to be one of the dogs that the dog walker that we saw earlier in the episode was taking out, along with the rest of the lieutenant's dogs. And whenever she was doing that the first time, the dog freaked out and was like trying to attack McGee. And I'm just like, what was that about? It seemed kind of random at the time. I'm like, that's probably important for some reason. Well, they see the dog again because this, I think his name was Ricochet, is what he called himself. We see he has the dog and the dog's fine with McGee now. And that's when it hit me. Wait a minute. That's a police dog, isn't it? It's the same type of dog that police use most of the time. What if it's a drug dog? And it just sort of started clicking. I'm like, wait a minute. He did have cocaine on him. Maybe McGee somehow got the cocaine on, but where would he be? Wait, the sand trap. He was in the sand trap, and the guy was near the sand trap. Maybe that has something to... Sure enough, McGee takes the dog. They go back to the golf course and find out that there was cocaine sand in there and somehow got mixed up and ended up at the golf course. And so that's how they used to track down the lady that's sort of behind all the selling and distributing of the cocaine. They use her to get to the big boss, and that's pretty much that for that episode. So overall, the case was pretty interesting. The side story wasn't. So it was kind of like the first episode, the case was, okay, but it had some problems. The side story was pretty funny. Second episode, the case was pretty interesting. The side story was pretty, funny at times, but for the most part, very cliche, done before. But then we get to the third episode of this three. Episode 7, what is it called? I'm going to remember. Burden of Proof. That's right. So yeah, we get to this episode, and it starts off fairly interesting enough. We see this guy talking to a lawyer in prison, talking about his case that happened 10 years ago, and saying, I feel like every single time I see, or I think about this case, I see that picture in my head, and I just can't believe that I could have possibly done it. And she's like, well, what do you think happened? He said, I think I was framed. By who? NCIS. And so already it's kind of kicking off to kind of what is this about? Is this going to fall back on one of our members of the team? Come to find out that none of the actual members of the team were involved with this case. It's a guy, I think he may have been on the show once, and I don't remember him now, but it's some guy that wasn't involved in the team at all. Apparently they did kind of a dual thing with the FBI on this one case. Well, ultimately, this lawyer brings the case to NCIS because she looks into them and finds out no reason for them to have framed, so most likely didn't happen. And so she brings the case to Gibbs. She's like, look, can you help me get my client some justice? So she brings in the body to have Ducky and Jimmy look at it, and they both look at it and come to the same conclusion. Your killer was left-handed, and he's right-handed. And so, of course, now they're like, well, evidence points to him being innocent, so we need to find out how is he innocent? What happened? And so they're going through all this stuff. They're trying to find this witness that disappeared. Tobias Fornell was brought back to the case. Apparently, he was the FBI agent in charge of this case, and he was 100% convinced that this guy did it, but he didn't have any evidence for it. So, come to find out after this long, long set of circumstances, Gibbs does track down the witness, and she tells him, I didn't see, or I don't remember who I saw, but I did see him, and I do remember that he was a black man in his 40s. And of course, that's not the culprit at all. He's a white man, early 30s probably. And so, of course, Gibbs is like, well, that's great. But then she says, I told that to the FBI agent in charge of the case. So now we come to find out that apparently Fornell heard about this case, or heard about this from the woman, didn't believe her, and so wrote her off. Pretty much said you're lying and didn't even take that information in. So, not really perjury, but obstruction of justice. And so now Gibbs is struggling with the thought of, do I give this information in court and possibly ruin the career of one of my best friends, or do I hide it and possibly let an innocent man go free or get arrested, put back in jail for something he didn't do? So, yeah, very difficult conundrum. He ends up going to Sloan about it, and this is where, like I said, I did start to like her character a bit more because, yeah, she's first of all a very interesting character in her own right because they're handling her very well, kind of making her a bit vague and mysterious, but also showing the power that she has in her psychology. But in this case, does a very good job of sort of not telling Gibbs, here's what you should do, but showing him sometimes, you have to make the decision based off of what you feel. And, pretty much showing him this whole thing about the cabinet that she brought in, which, of course, is funny because the rest of the team's been freaking out about this cabinet for the whole episode. Like, she's got all our files in there. She's been documenting us. What do we do? And then we come to find out from her that apparently this cabinet doesn't have any files in it at all. It doesn't even open. She just brings it around because her dad made it, who was a very good craftsman, but he made a mistake in this case. And so now it's a cabinet that doesn't actually work. And so it's sort of a reminder of the type of person her dad was, who normally was such a good craftsman, but in this case was so rushed because he was making it for her mom that he made a mistake. And then her mom, despite the fact that it's a broken cabinet, kept it anyway because that's how she felt about her dad. And it just, very nice story, but it also shows even the best people can make mistakes sometimes. And so Gibbs realizes this, takes that into court, and then tells the truth. Tells about the witness, tells that Fornell was the one that heard this information but didn't give it. And then we come to find out through all of this, because it's been kind of an intense episode overall, because there's been a lot of arguing between Gibbs and Fornell, Gibbs and even some of the team at times. He's yelling at them, trying to figure out what's going on. The lawyer's yelling at people because she wants to find out what's going on. And so I'm wondering, is this going to be the end of Gibbs and Fornell's friendship? Going forward, are they going to have this bitterness between them now? But then we come to find out that Fornell actually is the one that called the lawyer to tell her that Gibbs found witness X that they've been looking for. And I'm just like, it makes sense. And he even says, this weight has been on my back for so long, I knew you would know what to do. You would do the right thing. And so yeah, it's a very nice sentiment. It's nice to see Fornell isn't mad about it because he wanted this justice as well. He was responsible for what happened. And so he wanted Gibbs to sort of make up for that by talking to the witness and then correcting his mistake from so long ago by sharing this information. Even if he doesn't necessarily think it's right, he does see the value of evidence and witness testimony. But despite all of this, we come to find out after this is all said and done, the lawyer and the guy who is charged are talking to the media. The guy comes to talk to Gibbs. He's just like, I feel great. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And he's like, Gibbs is like, well, maybe go get some ice cream. He's like, yeah, chocolate ice cream, just like me and my dad used to have. He was like, wait, didn't you say you and your dad had vanilla ice cream? He's like, oh, yeah. I'm just so overwhelmed by this instance right now. And the look on Gibbs' face, you can see he's just kind of like, wait a minute. If you lied about that, how easy is it for you to lie and get away with it? How easy is it for you to fool people if it was something like eating ice cream? If you have that ability to tell a lie and us miss it, what else have you been lying about? Well, he apparently takes Sloan with him and they start following the guy and he's hitting in the batting cages and then finally he gets kind of this cocky expression on his face and he just starts swinging and Gibbs just like, he knows we're here. He knows we're following him. And the next thing you know, he turns to the other side of the plate in the batting cages and starts hitting left-handed. And Sloan looks at Gibbs, she's like, switch hitter. And that's when you realize that, yeah, he actually did it. Not only that, in the middle of the episode, they find out that apparently whoever killed this lieutenant that this guy was being framed for, apparently this was the work of a serial killer because they find a calling card that matches 4 other cases just like it. And so they realize that this is the work of a serial killer. And so they finally get this guy cleared based off of this witness testimony, who I assume we'll find out whether she was being threatened or whether she just made a mistake later. But yeah, we let out a serial killer. And the interesting thing about all this is the first time I can think of that they've made this type of mistake before. Because at first it seemed like it was Tobias and the past NCIS team that made this mistake and convicted an innocent man of murder. I mean, how could they? But now the tables have flipped because Gibbs and his team are responsible for letting a serial killer loose. That in itself is not only twisted, but sets up for a great story later on, and it's got me excited. Because this could be the story of this season. Watching this guy, seeing what he's going to do next. Is he going to turn and start killing people again? Are people going to start turning up dead and their license with their blood on their face? Are they going to start popping up and like, look, he's resurfaced, he's back again. What are we going to do? How can we stop him? There's no evidence to tie him to these murders. We've already cleared him of this past murder, so double jeopardy. It's a very interesting concept. And while I do kind of find it a little bit frustrating that, after all of this, after everything they went through to convince us that this guy was innocent, just the very end of the episode, they'll throw in, oh yeah, he's guilty. I kind of am a little bit frustrated by that because you're going to convince us for so long that somebody's innocent just to, oh, he's actually guilty. I don't know. I feel like that in itself is kind of like, you just feel like you're just sort of throwing in a shock ending. But at the same time, if they utilize this well enough, if they take this information and actually turn it into a very interesting, I guess, overarching story for this season, it could be a lot of fun. it could be really, really interesting to see these episodes popping up where they're looking into this guy. They're trying to find out, make sure he's not killing anybody if people are popping up dead, trying to solve these cases, trying to see if they can connect it back to him. Because frankly, I mean, you just let a serial killer loose, it should not just be something you blow over. Gibbs says at the end of this episode, the game isn't over yet. So clearly he still feels like they can get to him, but I mean, is it going to be something where they just talk about him for the next few episodes and then he doesn't really appear, but they're just like, look, we need to make sure we keep tabs on this guy? Is it going to be a case where maybe he goes after one of the team members? Maybe he goes after Sloan, or maybe one of the newer kind of side cast members now. I don't know. I'll be very interested to see what's going to happen next with him, because this story feels like it's got a great setup, but it's just how they utilize it now. Do they do a good job of trying to keep him involved, trying to keep this story involved, or is it just going to be something where they just kind of blow it off to the side until the end of the season, they bring him back up? I hope they don't do that, because I want to see more out of it, but I guess we'll have to see. So that's been these past 3 episodes. First 2 had some really good moments, overall enjoyable, not necessarily anything spectacular, but I haven't really come to expect spectacular out of NCIS anymore. It's in its 15th season. As long as it's still consistently enjoyable, has some funny moments, has some decent cases, I'm okay. I'll take it for what it's worth. But that 3rd episode of these 3 definitely caught my attention, and definitely has me interested to see what else they've got up their sleeves this season. Is it going to get better from here? Is it going to kind of drop back into its old formula? I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do next. So, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know what we can talk about and discuss, all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future NCIS reviews. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.